came and is here today, and we thank you so much for taking the time to share your ideas, your experiences with each other. Tara is very upset by this room, and I say the room's fine. You know, we're comfortable. We have comfortable chairs. It's a good temperature. We got good company, so don't worry about it. The screen's big. So we know the room is not totally conducive to the kinds of things we want to do, but we're flexible, right? We're good people. We can make this work. This is the spring conference, and it's really good to see so many people here. And what APPAM usually does in the spring conference is try to do something special, something more targeted for our membership. And the idea of pedagogy, the idea of teaching, the idea of curriculum, the idea of using research and how we take the research and experiences we've all had in the classrooms and bring it to our students and to each other, that's the theme that we're hoping to follow through with today. So I welcome you all. I think this is going to be a very good conference. I was looking at all of the sessions, and I wish I could go to all of them, but we had to have them compete against each other in a way. So if you can't get to a particular session that you would like to hear what people have to say, then please feel free to contact your colleagues and talk to them about the session and talk about what you learned in other sessions. This is really a network building experience as well, not just to come and show your research or show your experience, but really get to know each other and to create a larger and more robust network. So I thank all of you for coming. There's a couple housekeeping things. This upcoming session is going to be televised, so as soon as I finish and Paul finish speaking, we'd like you to go get your coffee and berries or croissant and come back to the table, because it is going to have, it's going to be televised. Everybody knows where the restrooms are, etc., and I don't want to spend too much more time just idle chat here. I do want to thank you again, and I want to introduce Paul Decker, who's the past president of APPAM. He'll say a few words, and we can get started. Paul?
Thank you. First of all, I think we should pat ourselves on the back for coming inside on a day like this after the winter we've had. I think it shows real dedication to our craft. I'd like to start out thanking Doug Besheroff and Michael Shires, who really put this together with the support of Tara Sheehan and her staff. So we thank you for doing that. While I've got the microphone, I want to make a few points. I was supposed to really stand up here and represent the employer side of this picture, and as president of Mathematica, I can certainly do that. I have 3 points that I'll make because I might not get a chance later. One is a recognition that there's a strong track record of success here. 25 years ago, when we were hiring folks essentially at the master's level, it was pretty much catch as catch can. We hired them from all over the place, and it was hard to find candidates in those categories. And over the years, as the public policy programs and public administration programs have thrived and expanded, over time we've begun to hire more regularly out of those programs, to the point now where I would guess the majority of our hiring, well, the vast majority of our hiring at the master's level are from public policy, public administration, or public health programs. They've really crowded out those other sources of candidates that we've had. So that's a testament to the success that you all have had in developing your students and preparing them for their careers. A second point I want to make, and I think we'll hear a lot more detail on it in the first plenary session, is from an employer's perspective, at least from Mathematica's perspective, this can be, what we're looking for can be boiled down to a pretty simple story. It comes down to analytical capability and writing ability. Those are 2 things that really smooth somebody's transition to being an effective researcher in our market. And obviously this will get refined with greater detail in the later discussion, but if you want to think about it in simple terms, that's the way to think about it. And then finally, there's a third piece to this, which relates to a session that's going to be later on big data. When we hire folks, a lot of what we're doing in our hiring is making sure we're bringing in new generations that allow us to keep up to a level of state-of-the-art in our business. And that applies with respect to methodology, where it's the graduating students who are really the most teched up and know the latest tools, and we rely on them to bring the organization forward on the tools as well. But as we move into this era of big data, it's not those of us who have been in the business for 30 years already who are really going to figure out that picture will obviously have a role. but it's the students coming in who have had their career development begin in this new era of big data, and we want them to bring the ideas and the tools that's necessary to navigate that world to the organization to help transform the organization. So that's our perspective, and I look forward to building on this track record of success that I referred to earlier and moving it forward into the future. So we'll get started. I think I'm turning it over to Doug, who's the moderator for the first session. Thanks, everyone.
Angela, Paul, thank you. So I'm not sure about the choreography here. Ben, are we running or do you need to? Now we're, okay. Well, welcome. Hi. I'm Doug Besheroff from the University of Maryland, and I'm delighted to welcome you here on Cherry Blossom Week. As Paul said, it's nice outside, but it's going to rain at about 10, so don't feel so bad. We're getting started a little late. My apologies for that. We have a set program here to wake you up. This is a round-robin presentation, which is to say each speaker gets 2.5 minutes for one question. We go to the next speaker, we go to the next speaker, we go to the next speaker, and then we start all over again. So yeah, they're nice people that are putting up with this format. Let me introduce our panel first. At your, I think, far left is Barbara Devaney. She is the Chief Operating Officer of Mathematical Policy Research. She's an economist, and she's been at Mathematica for 36 years. I asked her to tell me, give me a little bit of bio, and the most important thing for this session is that she started at Mathematica as a researcher. Now, of course, Mathematica was a lot smaller in those days, but I think it's still possible to start as a researcher and end up as president. Yes, same thing. There you are. There you are. Immediately to Barbara's left is Demetra Nightingale. She is Chief Evaluation Officer of the Department of Labor, the total Department of Labor. Before that, she was at Johns Hopkins and the Urban Institute doing wonderful, I teach them, so I know they're wonderful, evaluations of welfare reform. And I bet you she's going to go back and do that. And she's teaching now also at GW. And then someone I just met on the phone in preparation for this session, and that's David Romans, who is, for 7 years, has been the Deputy, can't read it, Deputy Secretary, there you are, of the Maryland Department of Budget and Management. So as you can tell, we're going from big firm, whoops, federal government, state government, and if I don't mess up here, to local government, and Chuck Short, who is my colleague at the University of Maryland. Chuck is also special assistant to the Montgomery County Executive, Ike Leggett. We are 1 million people strong in Montgomery County, so we're as big as we're almost as big as some states, I think. That's a funny title. What he actually does is problem solve the county exec across everything, but he's here both because he's at the county level, but also he was the director of human services for Montgomery County, and before that active in Catholic Charities. All right, I get to say a few things to start with. Courtesy of NASPA, here's employment of MPP and MPA graduates in 2012. You know, we all know to worry about exact numbers, so I just want to show you roughly where our people go. And then on the next slide, and my only other slide, we'll do a comparison between MPPs and MPAs, which is actually quite interesting. One thing I enjoy looking at here, because I sort of wonder, is whether our further education people and our unemployed people are the same people. I remember that when they asked me, I said I was looking for further education when I was really looking for a job. Anyway, across all our programs, you can see local government is the largest category, state government second largest, federal government, nonprofit domestic is right up there as well. But this is across both sets of programs. And then when you divide, it's really quite striking here. I'll give you a minute to just look at it, and then I'll point out what I think are the 5 most striking differences here. First of all, the MPPs are almost 3 times more likely to work in the federal government. And you can see here that the MPPs are not quite half as likely to be in state government, or the other way around, the MPAs are almost twice as likely to be in state government. You get this real difference in local government where the MPAs are something like 1/5 as likely to be in local government. Private research firms, another place where there's a large difference, almost 3 to 1. And then I did not look at the original data carefully enough. This was a last-minute idea to put these up, so I did not look real hard. But what this tells me is that there are many more MPA students in this mix than MPPs, because the 4% is the average, so it must be driving the entire pie chart on the other side. Okay, now with our round robin. As I said, we have 5 questions, and just to tell you ahead of time roughly what they are, but also to tell you that I know this group here, and we needed to be very tough. So we have Becky over there. Becky, raise your hand. Becky has 2 signs. One says 1.5 minutes, and the other sign says stop. And I think it might work if we keep enough pressure on this. All right, here we go. There are going to be 5 questions. One is introductions. Another is about technical skills and qualities. The third is going to be personal qualities, and we're going to keep that separate. The fourth is going to be career ladders, and the last one is lessons for the school. Barb, you're first up. Tell us a little bit about your firm. Tell us about the hiring process, and I think what's really quite interesting in terms of entry level, do you all work on an as-needed basis or cohorts?
Good morning, everyone. Let me talk first about Mathematica policy research and then a little bit about our hiring process. So Mathematica is a social policy research firm. We have more than 1,000 employees, and we specialize in program evaluation, policy research and interpretation, survey design and data collection, and performance measurement and data analytics. We were founded in 1968 to run the first social policy experiment in the United States, the New Jersey negative income tax experiment, which I hope many of you have heard about. But today we now have 6 offices across the country. We're located in Princeton, DC, Cambridge, Ann Arbor, Chicago, and Oakland. We work on both domestic and global policy issues for the federal government, for state and local governments, for foundations, universities, professional associations, and some private companies as well. And we also work in a wide range of policy areas that range from health, education, early childhood, family support, nutrition, employment and training, disability, and international development. We are organized into 3 operating divisions. So there's a Human Services Research Division, a Health Research Division, and a Survey and Information Services Division. In terms of hiring, which I'm going to turn to now, we do hire mostly from the MPP and MPA programs into the Health and Human Services Research Divisions. Mathematica is really a mission-driven organization. Very simply, our mission is to improve public policy through objective and high-quality research and data collection. So when we're hiring, we really look at candidates who will fulfill that mission and actually share in the values of the organization, which are quality, objectivity, integrity, and collegiality. We've been growing very rapidly in the last decade, and because of that, our hiring tends to be year-round. It tends to be both cohort-based and as needed. Although, because for the master's level students, we do try to time it with the academic cycle when they're finishing their degrees. We recruit from a wide variety of programs. As an example, this year, in the last 4 months, we've actually hired 12, and we have a couple of outstanding offers, so we're probably going to end up with 15 hires from MPP and MPA programs. And those will be across all of our offices and across both of our divisions. So I'll turn it over to Demetra.
Thank you. For much of my career, I was on the research side. I was 40 years at the Urban Institute, and then on the academic side about 12 years. So I've been with the federal government for 2 years as an appointee with the Obama administration as the Chief Evaluation Officer, I've learned something about the hiring in the federal government that I didn't know before. One, at least right now, all of the jobs are posted through usajobs.gov. The kinds of networking that we talk about helps, especially on the political side, not so much on the career side. It is right now challenging to come in from the outside and to get into the federal government at every level, into the career side. Some of the good ways that MPPs rise to the top is through the Presidential Management Fellows, through the GAO internship programs, through other internships that either are specific to departments or supported and funded by foundations. So in hiring, in the research world, because the Urban Institute doesn't do as much straight data collection and big projects as Mathematica, other times when I've spoken at panels like this at APPAM, I would say we don't hire that many MPPs. That's changed because of, as Paul said, because of data analytics, because of new technology. The government really needs people with those new technologies. I would encourage faculty members to get your students involved in internship programs leading to public service early, quickly, give them opportunities to network with those of us who are within the government to help them to identify the right vehicles for getting in, because it is right now very difficult because of the fiscal situation and because of personnel procedures. It's hard to break into the federal government, and we need all the networking and support to help the students figure that out.
I work at the Maryland Department of Budget and Management. We're sort of a control agency in state government, so we do procurement, personnel, and operating and capital budget. I'm going to focus today on the operating and capital budget because that's where we hire our public policy and public administration folks from. So we primarily hire people right out of school or recently completing their master's degree programs. They come in and work 2 to 4 years with us and move on to other opportunities. And what we have them do is they come in and they're assigned to a state agency or a set of state agencies, and their job is to become an expert on that agency's budget, on their operations, their programs, be able to answer questions about sort of all aspects of that agency, evaluate their performance, and sort of other management issues that come up. And ultimately what they do in helping to assemble the governor's budget is prepare a written analysis, which can be anywhere, depending on the size of the agency, from 10 to 40 pages, and then present that to the secretary of our department, and then ultimately at a hearing with the agency whose budget they reviewed, and they're making recommendations to cut that agency's budget, in some cases to add to it, to identify management problems. So it's a really, really good opportunity for someone coming in because they get to interact with high-level people in state government. In terms of our hiring process, we hire every year because we tend to bring in young people. We tend to move on fairly quickly, so we're hire anywhere from 5 to 7 people, usually in the spring around the time people are graduating from programs. Almost all of our folks have masters in public administration or public management, public policy. We require an advanced degree. Occasionally we'll hire an MBA or a lawyer, but we tend to find those folks don't fit in as well. And just one other comment is we've been finding that we almost exclusively hire from 2 universities right now, Syracuse University and the University of Maryland College Park. And one of the reasons for that is we give in the hiring process a test. And those are the students who generally pass their test. A lot of other programs are unable to pass a test on writing skills and quantitative analysis.
We paid him to say that. But I think David also said, let me take 30 seconds, that also there's a network at work for Syracuse. They have one person from Syracuse, and he encourages, and I think this is something, a lesson for all of us, which is networks, even in this area, work a lot. Chuck.
Thank you, Doug. Good morning, everyone. I'm Chuck Short, and I'm, as Doug mentioned, Special Assistant to Montgomery County Executive Ike Leggett. We're a county, about 1 million people, located right outside of Washington. We're a county that can essentially be used as a laboratory for a number of reasons. We now are a county that is a majority minority county. Yet we still are a very affluent county. What we do basically is govern, serve, and engage. In all of the, you can define that in all the ways you can define it, but at the local level, that's where we are. We have about 10,000 employees, 10% fewer than when the Great Recession began for us in 2010 and 11. But we're back to hiring. That's the good news. Again, I would say to you, if you have some graduate students looking for projects, PhD, thesis, maybe you might want to dig deeply into a county like Montgomery County to study our hiring practices as they relate to your graduates, because hiring in local government, like federal government, is very, very challenging. The greatest challenge is to acquire the individual with the skills we want. The system often works against us. We hire as needed, not in cohorts, we're hiring in an environment which is a rigid merit system environment, and one that is also unionized, and one that, as I mentioned earlier, has conflicting objectives. Not only is our objective to hire the most competent, but it also is to diversify our workforce and to do a number of other things with our workforce. We passed legislation in Montgomery County last week that provides for a local option. So in a tie in the merit system, we have to hire someone who lives in Montgomery County. An important point for you all to know is that we have, in order to increase our diversity, we now have de-emphasized the role of a master's degree and increased the value of equivalent experience in place of education. Thank you.
Panel, thank you, and thank you for being within the time frame. Demeter's got the next question, and this is about technical skills and competencies. And that's, to what extent does your agency hire MPPs and MPAs? You mentioned that a little bit. But do specific technical competencies like policy analysis, spreadsheet management, quantitative analysis, evaluation, do they count? How important are they? And even though they're all going to say, but we really hire for personality as well, we have a follow-up question about personalities. So technical competencies first, Demetra.
We really hire for technical competencies, not for personality. I'm speaking for what I do as hiring and also what I see throughout the Department of Labor. When I first started teaching in a public policy program, and I don't know if any of my Johns Hopkins colleagues are here, I wasn't so sure about that memo writing, those policy memos. I now, in the federal government, I value the ability to write concise, balanced policy analysis papers or memos or whatever it is that you're calling it. And having the technical skills, it doesn't mean being able to actually conduct a full evaluation or conduct propensity score matching, but I am looking for people who have an understanding of the technical assumptions and requirements of those analytic approaches so that they can converse with Barb Devaney and other people of her caliber that are doing some of the analysis that we have. So they're not expected to actually carry out the application of the statistical analysis, but we do require that they understand the quantitative skills that are involved. In addition to the synthesis and analytic capabilities, we also are looking for new MPP. We have mostly MPPs in the evaluation part of the federal government, but we're looking for those who also have the new technologies around social media, around public communication using the technology, the internet, understanding how to do geo mapping and being able to manipulate big data on the cloud, whatever that is, but to be able to serve as an intermediary between some of the agency administrators and the researchers with whom we work in the field.
David.
I'd say it's less about technical competencies, more three kind of core things that we're looking for. One is excellent communication skills. You need to be able to write well. And we do a combination. I mentioned we do longer written analysis, but we also have a lot of emails and very short responses to members of the governor's office, to the secretary, where you need to be able to condense information and provide the information the policymaker needs quickly. So we're looking for people who can do all sorts of writing. You have to have strong verbal communication skills because you're making presentations to cabinet secretaries, to members in the governor's office. So again, you have to be able to communicate with people. Analytical skills is the next most important thing. I mean, we're hiring budget analysts, and we really need them to have critical thinking, problem-solving skills. And then the third thing we're looking for is quantitative skills. And some people think of the budget world as you need to know accounting and you need to be able to do a lot of regression. And very few of the people we hire have those skills. What we're looking for is people who can sort of conceptualize how to develop the estimate on a piece of legislation. What's the fiscal cost of this legislation? And think through all the components and factors that might drive the cost, and then actually develop a simple model or do some calculations. And that's one of the areas that I mentioned the tests before. An awful lot of graduates of public policy and public administration programs are unable to take a test, which is one or two questions, which is some basic information about a bill. And we ask them to write up the bill and then do some quantitative analysis of it. And a substantial number failed the quantitative side. So it's very frustrating as an employer that people with master's degrees can't do relatively straightforward mathematical quantitative work.
Chuck.
Thank you, David. Off that point, we'll ask new hires to do a project like David described, and we'll get a 30-page paper. So you guys have done a great job at teaching folks how to do 30-page papers, but we need to focus on 3-page policy statements a little bit. I'm not going to repeat some of the things that have been said. I'm going to talk about the core competencies that I learned. In preparation for this event, I talked to our human resources director, our county stat director, and our OMB director. And in addition to some of the things you've heard, here are some things that I don't think were said. Those individuals look for people who can demonstrate that they holistically understand issues much more comprehensively than narrowly. They seek people, particularly in our county, and it'll be true in almost every jurisdiction, who have some clear understanding of the impact of diversity in a community. Enormous impact in most jurisdictions throughout the United States today. Doesn't mean in a new hire we're going to expect an expert, but we look for some people at least use those words in an interview. That diversity matters. The other thing that matters a lot to us is people who are very, very comfortable in a rapidly changing work environment and political environment and social environment. And again, we're not looking for an entry-level employee who's an expert, but if they don't even say the words change, we know we're not talking to the right candidate for us. We are very much looking, particularly in budget and in county stat, for people who have some sense that procurement, human resources, and other governmental systems often simply don't work. To propose programs, propose budgets that assume these processes work in a timely basis is a level of naivete that we don't want to hire. Again, we're not looking for someone that can solve all those problems right away, but we're looking for someone who knows that they exist. And finally, I think as Demetra said, we are looking for people who are current in technology, especially social media. We see that in the local level as a real important way for us to engage our citizens in Montgomery County. Thank you.
Barb.
I'm going to focus my answers here really on the core competencies, what we expect on the transcripts that we see from the schools, and then in the next question I'll talk about some of the other skills too. So essentially, Doug had a list of them, and I would say all of the above. We're really looking for the basic courses in policy analysis, statistics, some econometrics, program evaluation, and an exposure to cost-benefit analysis, not necessarily a whole course on cost-benefit analysis. One point I'd like to make here, though, is that the programs have become very strong in terms of the quantitative skills that the courses they're offering, and many of the students that we see have very strong quantitative skills, but we don't actually focus on the MPP or the MPA students as bringing the strongest quantitative skills. We have new PhDs that come with those skills. And it's great to have, they have to have the basic understanding, but we don't really expect them to be at the forefront of propensity matching or regression discontinuity designs, things of that sort. One trend that we've also seen, this is maybe stepping a little bit away from what we see in the transcript, but we see in the resume, is more and more of the candidates that we're seeing from these programs have some relevant work experience too. This is internships and also work experience before they've gone back to graduate school. When we see candidates that go right from undergraduate into the master's programs or that are in a 5-year program, a combination of a BA and a master's, they're actually less attractive to us than those who've had more work experience. So for example, if we're trying to hire an MPP student who is interested in education policy, if we see somebody who's getting their MPP and they were a Teach for America teacher after they were in their undergraduate for a couple of years, they look a lot stronger to us than some people who really don't have relevant experience.
Thank you very much. You caught me having a sip. Okay, David, personal qualities and soft skills. This is tricky. Demetra said we don't go by personality. But personal qualities a little different here. This is interpersonal management, able to get along in meetings, say yes when a supervisor says do something reasonable, of course, and these are difficult to measure. Hey, I'm trained, I am trained, I am. But let me ask you to explore that part of this, which is the soft skills. David first.
Sure. I'd say the most important soft skill in our job is having pretty good interpersonal skills, because you're trying to get information out of folks at state agencies who may or may not want to share that information with you, so trying to develop good relationships with those people and then being able to conduct yourself in dealing with the more senior people in the agency is really critical. As a budget department, we're not real focused outwardly in sort of the Facebook, the social media world. Some other aspects of state government are, but that's not really a function that we're involved with. I'd say the other sort of soft skill that I look for that goes kind of beyond the analytical skills is people who are really inquisitive and questioning and not accepting of things necessarily as just fact when someone tells them. Because a lot of people come in and it's government. If someone gives me a number from the agency, that number must be right. And they don't ask questions or, kind of consider maybe the data isn't correct, or maybe there's oddities in the data that I should understand because the trend I'm seeing isn't really a true trend. There was some year where the data was all bad and it's skewing my trend. So it's that people who are not afraid to ask questions and challenge people who've been working in state government for 20 years and, just want to kind of push them off. So, I mean, it's kind of the balance between being able to work with people and still having that edge and being willing to challenge folks are kind of the key skills that we look for.
Jeff.
Thank you, David. Soft skills are really important at the local government level where we are every day engaged with our shareholders. Yet they are the hardest to test for often. We rely very, very heavily on two things: experience, as someone mentioned earlier. the kinds of projects that students have done in their courses. The more work or on-the-ground experience people have had, the better. The kinds of things that we're looking for, again, specifically in management budget and county stat and related programs, we're looking for folks who have an understanding of policies, the fiscal responsibility, politically sensitive. We have to be politically sensitive at the local level. Doesn't mean to be politically driven. Underscored, two very different things. It's sensitive, not driven. Professionally competent. We're always looking for people who proposing policies that rely on professionally competent solutions, not solutions that just save money. Functionally collaborative. We're looking for people who really get it when it comes to collaboration, understands that to close the achievement gap in a public school system, you must collaborate with the local nonprofit organizations, you must collaborate with the local public health organizations and parents and others if you're going to be successful. So we seek people who are functionally collaborative, ethically grounded. Local level ethics is extremely important. We're always under the microscope, and anything we do is quickly on the internet that may be unethical. As I mentioned earlier, being aware of our diversity and responding to it is critically important. We not only cultural but socioeconomic. In Montgomery County and like many places, we have enormous diversity in every imaginable way, and we need people that have those kinds of skills. Obviously heard about the importance of data. I'm not going to report that. And finally, I would just mention that we look for people who are very much at the local level. We look for people who are very much service-oriented, customer-oriented. Customer service is very, very important. Thanks.
Barb, back to you. And I think we have two mics, so you go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Okay, in this question, I actually am going to cover two parts, the general competencies, before it was the core competencies, and also these softer skills. And in the general competency, I'm going to just reiterate something that's been said several times already today, which is the importance of clear writing, good, strong writing, and analytical skills. I mean, I can't stress it enough. We do a lot of writing at Mathematica. We write project reports, we write issue briefs, we write memos, we write letters to program sites, we do presentations to clients. And the ability to write is just the skill that we value the most. And what we've seen is that strong writing skills generally tends to equate with strong analytical thinking. And they're the people who do the best at Mathematica. You can have people who have the strongest quantitative skills imaginable, but if they can't explain it to a colleague or to a client, if they can't write it up, it's really not very useful to us. So writing is the most important skill that we ask for. In terms of some of these other softer skills, I would stress first collegiality. We do a lot of work in teams at Mathematica. Practically every single project is more than one person, and sometimes they're 20, 50. There's one project we have that's 100 people working on it with 5 or 6 subcontractors. It's a team effort, and so people have to like to be part of a team and do well on the team. And another set, which is something that hasn't been really mentioned, I guess it has been mentioned indirectly, is good qualitative skills. Many of our projects involve not just determining the impacts of a program, but also how is a program designed, implemented, and operated. And that involves meeting with program directors, meeting with program participants, being able to think carefully about how this is designed and operates on the ground. So we need people who can do that well, have good interpersonal skills, and can be analytical in thinking about implementation, and experience with these qualitative analysis techniques.
The three of them have said a lot of the things that we would also hold at the federal government. First, at the federal government's huge. There's room for everybody. So even those who are quiet and a little bit shy and introvert, there's a spot for people like that at the Urban Institute, at the federal government as well. But as I said, when I was in the research side at the Urban Institute, the kinds of things that we looked for there are also the kinds of things that we look for in an evaluation unit in the federal government. And as others have said, the inquisitive nature, being able to dig into sort of the reasons for some of the trends and causes and the data that are evident, having an ethical understanding of the ethics, both legally and personally, is critical in the federal government. And when you get to a certain level, you have to sign all kinds of ethical statements and conflict of interest rules. Understanding the collaborative nature of evaluation and research in the federal government is very important. I also look for individuals who show confidence and willingness to take initiative without a lot of direction, but also have the knowledge and the awareness of when to seek guidance and advice from more experienced people. So having the confidence helps, although lots of times you'll see new graduates coming out who are overconfident and they don't really know when to seek help because they don't want to look like they don't know what they're actually doing. But we need people who know what that balance is. And again, flexibility, and I would triply echo what Barb said about communication, particularly writing. One of the things that MPP programs do well, I think, is prepare students for being able to write quickly and well, and that serves them well in the federal government. But also the oral communication skills are equally important. I would put writing ahead of that.
Thanks. Chuck, so we all, as a group, worked on these questions, and I think this one more comes from me than some of the other questions. When my students come and they say, I've been offered a job at so-and-so, and often it's a place I've never heard of before, or it even could be urban, or whatever, and they say, should I take it? And that's what the next question is for, because I always ask them to ask the following question, not of the hiring person, but of the people on the staff there. And that is career ladders and next steps. Where do people go after a year or two in your shop? Do they get promoted? Do they go on? I assume it's a little bit of both. But tell us a little bit about that, starting with Chuck.
Thank you, Doug. We, again, we are a somewhat limited employer in that we have a rigid merit system and we have a union, so we can't just pick and choose as much as we would like. But individuals that do best in Montgomery County are people who exhibit the kind of soft skills and hard skills that you've heard. They get noticed in a local government. So, for example, in our Office of Management Budget, David, I don't know if you have this problem. It's a problem for the budget director. It's good for the employee. It's a good budget analyst quickly get gobbled up by operating departments because particularly if they can demonstrate that they are good with the hard skills but also have good soft skills, that they are able to build budgets based on collaboration with the department rather than criticism of a department. Those things are noticed, and so if you enter into county government through county stat or through a budget office or some policy office, you're often given significant visibility with senior officials in the county government because of your work in presenting the budget of a department to the county executive or to the county council, and you do get seen. So there are opportunities. The other place where a lot of our folks go, sometimes out of frustration, is into the nonprofit sector. Once they've demonstrated some pretty good skills in government, nonprofit organizations will try to gobble them up, particularly those who have do a lot of business with county government. And many of them end up as executive directors in nonprofit organizations within a short period of time. Thanks.
I'm going to ask the group to be flexible because they said that that was a key issue here. And let's reverse the order. David, why don't you respond, because we're right here in budget world, public and private agencies. Hope you don't mind, Barb.
Oh, it's fine.
Well, much like Chuck said, for us, I mean, our folks get a lot of exposure. They're young and enthusiastic and want to advance. So a substantial number of our staff are hired by other state agencies to be their budget officer, their chief financial officer. Recently, we had someone hired away to be the chief operating officer for the Department of Education, which was a huge jump in responsibility. So very much people get attracted to the other state agencies, and this is probably true in a lot of governments, but we're going through a real retirement phase. We have an aging workforce, so lots of opportunities are coming up, and our staff is sort of young, very bright individuals are getting picked off for a lot of those fairly senior management posts. The other area we lose a lot of staff to, being in Maryland, is the federal government. We're a budget department. We do all sorts of things, and we've lost 10 people in the last 3 years to CMS, which most of them weren't even doing health care or health policy, but CMS was hiring with the Affordable Care Act rolling out, and they were hiring master's degree folks. So that's really the other employer that we've been losing a lot of people to.
I'd like to take the liberty here, since I don't get to say too much here. We sent one MPA to the New York State Budget Office. Everyone else there was an MPP. I'm sorry, we sent one MPP, and everyone else there was MPA. And he said that the things he did, the things he was asked to do, were different from the others because he had many of these skills. And I don't mean that as a negative to the MPA programs, but that to encourage our MPAs to look at the budget jobs, because they are really, they're just as ripe for the MPA students as not. And that's just to emphasize that. Demetra, I'm sorry to interrupt.
In the federal government, as many of you know, the federal government's got a lot of strict career and personnel and human resources rules, and a lot of unionization. And I mentioned at the very beginning that it's difficult to break into the federal government unless it's through the internship and other programs. And also, like someone else earlier said, surprisingly, and people on the outside don't totally understand this, there is, for lots of reasons, there is not usually at almost any level an education requirement. So there's nothing that would necessarily require a master's degree, never mind an MPP. So that by identifying the MPP students for the entry-level positions that we have, and through internship programs, the career ladder opportunities are both within a department and across the federal government, because there's lots of movement in the career advancement across federal agencies. In the evaluation and research world, for example, I have staff right now who've worked at HHS, Department of Education, FNS, OMB, and I've got a couple of people who are leaving my office going to HHS, OMB, and FNS. So there's a lot of movement around the government, but they're moving up as they do that. And the MPPs do quite well in advancing if they understand sort of the kinds of skills that we've been talking about, and if they want to stay in the federal government. In the federal government, I've learned not a whole lot of people leave. They like being in the federal government, but there is more movement outside the federal government now than there was 10 or 15 years ago into academia. We have people here that have done that, and also into the private research sector, and using some of the tools and knowledge of governance that helps them outside as well. But there's lots of opportunity for advancement within the federal government.
Excuse me, at Mathematica, we think really carefully about establishing a career path for staff at all levels in the organization. Once we found somebody that has made it through the technical interview and the whole day interviewing process, we ask ourselves a question, which is, will this person be good for Mathematica, and will Mathematica be good for this person? And because we really hire with the hope and the intention that this person will stay at Mathematica for as long as I've been there and many others at Mathematica. So to do that, we know we have to make opportunities available for advancement, and we have a structure in place to identify what are the skills the person has, what are the needs that they need for further development. For MPP and MPA students, we tend to hire them at what we call our analyst level. And the goal is that they will then become a senior analyst, they become then a researcher, then a senior researcher, and chances are that somebody we could be hiring right now could be the next president of Mathematica. It can go all the way up the route. There is one piece of advice that I always give to new hires, if I'm asked, of course, that those who do the best at Mathematica tend to have flexible interests. They have interest in a broad range of policy interests that's not very narrowly focused. Policy areas or issues change over time, and the ability to go into adjacent areas and move with the flow is very important. Sometimes I put the advice in the following way, which is you're better off here liking what you do than doing only what you like.
Last question, and this is lessons for the schools. What should the schools teach? Now, I'm going to declare out of order, in advance, courses on writing, because you all made that point.
Oh, yeah.
And we heard it, right? We heard it, right? Writing, short, nothing long. The students will love it. I'll tell my students this week, forget about that 40-page paper you owe me. Do it on a page. And you know what they're going to say? They would prefer the 40 pages. But
Doug, we have 40-page papers too, and they have to be able to go the length on that as well.
I know. But I was struck, I think most of us were, by the number of mentions of social media. So in answering, please feel free to say evaluation, a little bit of cost benefit, but also if you do talk about social media, talk about it a little bit more. And by way of a little background here, I used to teach in law schools, and I was at Stanford recently. They have a subordinate part of a course on email writing, because it turns out that emails are the easiest way to miscommunicate, that it sounds angry when you're rushed and so forth. So there are all these little rules that they're taught when emailing fellow lawyers, not your spouse, not your friends, I guess, but it all applies at the same time. So Barb, I think you're first on this one. What, in addition to writing, should we all be teaching that maybe you think we're not? You know the basic things we teach.
Well, I wanted to start off by saying something, or reiterating something that I think Paul mentioned at the beginning. Am I doing that?
That was me.
Okay. And somebody else mentioned as well. That the programs, the public policy programs, the MPA programs, have become incredibly strong programs. We just see that the quality of the job applicants over the last 10, 15 years is just really incredible. And it's caused us to change a little bit of how we hire. Switching a little bit more into the master's level than to the PhD levels, partly because they come with a broader range of skills and writing abilities, actually, better writing abilities. So I think it's really important to acknowledge at the outset that this is, you guys are doing a great job and certainly meeting our needs. One of the courses, Doug had a list of courses, statistics, data analysis, microeconomics. All of those are important. Some of them are more important to us than others, but I think it's great that all of the students get that broad range. One course that I've seen is usually an elective, but it's very important to us, and I think you might hear this echoed by Demetra, is a program evaluation course. It is different than just an econometrics course or a statistics course. We look for, when people who come with those kinds of courses in their arsenal really understand at the outset the kind of work that we do. Now, I actually have a daughter who's in an MPA program now, and it's not a required course for her, and she's not actually interested in doing program evaluation as her career at a place like Mathematica. Although she did at one time work at Mathematica and got that experience.
And you have her resume here for any.
Yeah, that's right. But in any case, I really stressed very hard. She will say I kind of forced her to take this program evaluation course because it's something that I think almost any student really should have when they get out. In this point in time when there's so much of an emphasis on evidence-based decision making, if she's interested in doing program implementation or service delivery or public management, she still needs to understand what program evaluation is about. And I think she's actually very appreciative that she's taking this course.
Demetra?
I'm going to continue on that because I've also, in both teaching in public policy programs, having a degree from a public policy program, the PhD from GW, and hiring MPP students, I think it is, evaluation should be a required course for not only the MPPs, which it usually is, but for the MPAs. I think it's equally as important for the MPA students, and many of them don't have evaluation courses. And when I say that, I don't mean sort of the narrow, necessarily just the narrow focus on how do you do experimental design with random assignment or what are the basics of non-experimental analysis, but stepping back and saying how do you conceptualize and design an evaluation, how do you critique an evaluation, how do you know if the report that you're reading, if you're a state, local, or federal official, is solid and that the evidence is sound. And the MPP and MPA students need to be able to review and critique and know the strengths and weaknesses of the evidence that they're looking at. So I would strongly encourage both the not only the MPP but the MPA to include evaluation, and for the MPPs not to just have evaluation techniques but the conceptualization and the whole range of evaluations. And the same thing with cost-benefit analysis, that I'm finding teaching that many of the MPA students get cost-benefit analysis and the MPP students don't necessarily always have the cost-benefit analysis. So that's equally important, whether it's for fiscal and budgeting purposes or inclusion in evaluations. It's important to have both. So I would stress the importance of those. The other last point I wanted to make on the programs is the capstones. I know there's always a lot of controversy over capstones, but for hiring and moving into the federal government at least, think about capstone as an entree in. Right now, I know I'm involved with 4 or 5 capstone groups of students at the Labor Department, 3 from the Kennedy School, 1 from Georgetown, and 1 from GW. So it's a way for the agencies to get used to your students and to encourage the students to learn more about the government.
We have a session on capstones later today, and actually Chuck Short also teaches one of the capstones at Maryland. David, go ahead.
Well, I first want to echo the comment that, I mean, as I said at the start, we generally hire public policy and public administration graduates, and we find that graduates with other advanced degrees don't fit as well. So, I mean, starting out, I mean, you do kind of produce the type of people with the general skills that we're looking for. In terms of the coursework, I think the comments have already been made are useful. I mean, we're not really unhappy with the coursework. It's more about the skill sets that the people come out of those courses with, and I'm just going to reiterate writing. But also, for us, I mean, when we get into entitlement programs, Medicaid, foster care, welfare, there's a certain amount of forecasting and working with data, and we very, very rarely have people, even if they took budgeting and finance classes, come in and understand how to sort of conceptualize and set up even a simplistic model to forecast what is the, what are the trends and to then what are the costs and what can we expect in the next few years. And that's a skill that I just don't see. And like I say, even it doesn't seem to matter what courses people take, they don't come in with that skill. So that's something that I would like to see emphasized a little bit more. And then generally just being able to take a practical problem and think through logically how to analyze it. I mean, some people come in with that skill, but a number of others don't. So it's not just writing that 50-page paper. It's like being able to look at a more real-world problem and how do we figure out, what the costs and what the implications might be. And I don't really see that in some of the people that interview with us.
Thank you, David. I, too, would like to first begin by saying the courses that you all present and teach have produced some wonderful, wonderful men and women. As an adjunct, I am intimidated by the students that I work with each year. They're much smarter than I am. I have a little more wisdom maybe, but they have a lot more intellect than I do. And you've done a lot with that intellect. Thank you. I have like 5 courses I would suggest. One you've heard a lot about. I would put this up with writing, in my view, Doug, and that is more capstone. Experience, experience, experience. That's really what we look for. And if a student can put on their application that they have performed a specific project and they can articulate that project, that gives them a leg up, not only in learning, but a leg up in the competitive process to be hired. It's something that they get credit for by the personnel analysts. Second area that I think I would suggest you teach more about is to identify, to understand the core government systems of human resources, budgeting, fiscal analysis, and procurement, and to teach those and to teach them from a management and policy standpoint of how they ought to be done and how they often go wrong and how to make them work better for the organization. Critical to any organization. Another area that I think ought to be taught, my friend Russ Linden teaches this down in the University of Virginia, and that's effective collaboration and teamwork. Critically important in the world of addressing problems that are way more complicated than 1 or 2 disciplines any longer. Understand, and then of course I think it may sound trivial, but understanding the management of change and diversity in a community, how critically impactful those things are on the creation and implementations of policies and programs. And lastly, I would just echo again the importance of social media and understanding how social media can be used in program delivery and policy development. It is the language of our world as we move forward, and we have to teach our students to speak it and speak it well. Thanks.
What a panel, huh? I tell you. We really pushed them around, and we got a lot here. So we're open to questions. There is a webinar as well. I don't think there are any questions yet from the webinar. Ben, do you need people to go to the mics? If you have a question, please just go to the mics and we'll call you in order, starting when you get to the mic first. Identify yourself if you wish.
I'm Jody Sanford from the University of Minnesota at the Humboldt School. So I just want to say I really appreciate you being here. I love the convergence. Just a question for all of us, though. 20 to 25% of our graduates are going to nonprofits, and we don't have that perspective represented here. And it's just a curiosity to me. That's a very heterogeneous market. I wonder if we would have so much convergence if we had those types of employers represented. So we just have to keep that market in our mind.
Actually, Chuck Short, I didn't do his bio quite right. He's a twofer. Chuck, tell us what you did before you worked in the county government.
Well, I did for 6 years. I was the Secretary for Social Concerns for Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, and I oversaw all of our nonprofit organizations in service delivery and Catholic Charities and other.
So would your answers today be different if you?
No, they're not. They would not. They would not.
So sorry about that. That was I didn't do the whole thing.
They would. I'm sorry. They would be different only in the area where I talked about the rigidity of hiring. There's a little more flexibility in hiring and promoting when you're in the nonprofit sector.
There are 2 sets of mics, but I think he caught up after you did. So you're next, sir.
David Eaton, University of Texas. You mentioned social media, but without details. What are the skills that folks are needing and are going to need to be able to use things other than writing?
Second, examples, please. And examples, please. Demetra first.
I can tell you in the federal government, especially at the higher levels, there is a need for and an appetite for more blogging as a communication mechanism to the public, whether that's in public affairs or in the operating agencies of different departments, but there's a need to have those be concise, not long 20-page treatises on something, but to understand how to get the messaging out through blogs. That I can.
A specific example, Montgomery County, and this is a tribute to a University of Maryland student who incidentally was not able to speak English real well, so the project, the capstone course he did for me was to work with, about 5 years ago, to work with our local Department of Health and Human Services. He was very good at social media to create a particular social media program, and what that program does, and the department, by the way, didn't believe that social media could possibly be effective in their organization. First of all, he changed that perception, which was great, and now they're much better. But what he did was he created a social media program whereby our public health nurses could track and do public health education to pregnant, low-income women using social media. It was a very effective tool. It saves a lot of money and increases our ability to communicate with vulnerable pregnancies.
I think I'm going to actually broaden it a little bit to go beyond social media to just alternative forms of dissemination. So it's not just reports anymore, as we all know, but there are issue briefs, there's infographics, there's videos. One thing that we did this year, our communications department did it, but was to disseminate the results of a major evaluation through a video. And it almost crashed our website because the Washington Post picked it up and it just went viral. So I think it's just thinking very broadly about how to get the results out there.
Demetra, sure.
I have one other example, too, I would like to give is that, as you know, right now we have lots of separating military members coming back from active duty, and they're primarily young. And what we're finding is that they don't respond to the kinds of communication that some of us in this room may be more used to: telephones, mail, email. Too slow, too old-fashioned, so that using new technology, they're also now not using Facebook. I guess that's passé as well. But whether it's Twitter or texting or some of the newer approaches are important. So we need to not only incorporate those into programming, but also into the research and evaluation that we're doing.
I can add something to this. I've spoken to 3 different people who recently been hired at mid to senior levels at think tanks. And there's often a formal expectation, if not a requirement, of 1 blog a week, 1 blog a month, a number of tweets a month. And those things are monitored because it's become that important in the Washington think tank world. David, do you want to?
Really just echoing what other folks have said. I mean, not so much my department, but in state government, we're seeing more and more cabinet secretaries having blogs or tweeting. Webinars is another thing that's starting to be used to disseminate information more internal to state government across agencies, but those sort of tools.
Hi, Bill Powers from the University of Maryland. Thank you all very much today. You all emphasized methodologies, and yet our students spend a lot of time studying specific fields like what the environmental laws are or what the health policies and things like that, and you didn't really emphasize knowledge of those specific areas that could reflect the panel because you're all generalists yourselves, I think, and deal with a whole wide variety of areas. But to what extent are we perhaps need to spend more of our time on methodology, less on the actual policies of the day?
I mean, I guess speaking for the budget analysts that we hire, it's a plus sometimes if we have an opening in healthcare or human services area to have someone who has some background and demonstrated interest. But it's not something that's a key determinant in our hiring, and we're really looking for the skill set. We want smart people who come in with good analytical and writing skills, and that's really most essential. It's sort of just an added benefit if they have the policy background.
At the Labor Department, we are looking for area expertise. It doesn't mean we wouldn't hire someone who had no knowledge of any labor policy or program, but it certainly puts them in a better position for the hiring.
Yeah, I think being professionally competent is critical. We do want folks to know the law and to know the practices in particular areas. One of the points I wanted to make earlier, didn't have time, but I'd make it now, and that is I think that some of these things, Bill, perhaps could be achieved if we had a better working relationship with undergraduate schools, like William & Mary, which has an undergraduate school in public policy, or as well as a graduate school. And some of these things could be taught at the undergraduate level, maybe in juniors and seniors, and then advanced in graduate school.
We started a little late. We're going to do about 5 minutes thereabouts, so I'm going to ask us to speed up. Larry?
Larry Mead from NYU. You all mentioned writing, and I can certainly vouch for that. When I was in the government in the 70s, it's the only skill I had, and it allowed me to survive. So I certainly, yeah. But the problem I see at the university, how do we get the faculty to focus on this? We assign papers, but what the faculty typically don't do is bear down on the writing and correct all the low-level errors that, in fact, students are guilty of, and which torpedo them when they apply for jobs. How do we make it among the faculty's incentives to do that? Because as far as I can see, if they don't do it, nobody does it.
Only because of the time, I'm going to ask the lunch panel to answer that question, because there's a lunch panel that is made up of educators over here.
Can I just add one point on that?
Sure.
What I do in my classes that I teach is that I grade everything 2 ways. One is on composition and one is on technical and substance. So my students get both.
But wait, lunch.
Yes, I do.
Beth Cape from Indiana University. So I am a lawyer by degree. I teach law-related classes at the master's and undergraduate level, and I'm interested to hear from the employer perspective, understanding Mathematica may be a little bit different scenario here, but to have you comment briefly on what, if anything, you find valuable in MPA students coming in with a knowledge either of particular, picking up on the question before, but particular substantive legal principles, not maybe the laws of the environmental protection, but more things like the concepts of due process, which blend into ethical rules, or just the ways that legal institutions work, and Chuck, you mentioned kind of knowing how the government works a little bit more broadly, or how institutions use lawyers and who can communicate with lawyers and how to communicate with lawyers. Do you find this of value? Do you have particular areas that tend to arise in any of those, in procurement?
And I apologize, but briefly.
Yeah, sorry. My question was not brief.
Certainly, and at the Labor Department, I think in every federal agency, there's a need also for legislative process, understanding sort of how legislation is developed, but also regulatory analysis, both developing regulations and doing the analysis of regulatory effects.
We have 2 questions, one from the webinar and then one more in the room, and then we will adjourn to the next a break and then the next session.
This is from online audience. This is from Andrew Wilkes at LAU Brooklyn. When considering health administration and working within a hospital, what competencies should be emphasized on my resume?
I'm thinking, and I would begin with having some understanding of, I'm not sure what the job was. Did the gentleman indicate that the job, what the job was?
Just health administration.
Health administration. Well, certainly in health administration, have to have some clear understanding of where the Affordable Care Act is going. Not that anyone knows that yet. But clearly be aware that problems exist with that, because if you're administering a hospital, you better know at least what you can know about the Affordable Care Act. I think there are a lot of technical things, electronic records, Medicare, all those things associated that are technical. But I would also suggest that an individual know how to engage the community. In terms of hospital expansion, know what the state laws. Every state and some counties have administration, have laws that affect local hospitals, and he needs to be aware of those that apply. It is, and again, it depends on the size of the hospital. There may be human resources and procurement issues that would come into play if his job or her job would be hiring, firing, or procuring. So it depends on the nature of the job, but they ought to clearly demonstrate some expertise in those areas.
I'm going to just take the last question now because we are running a little late. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Wood from the Harvard Kennedy School. In the MPP program, we have a core curriculum that comprises most of the first year, and the second year is elective courses. One of the things that we debate is the degree to which employers should be able to know that every graduate of a certain program has a certain common foundation or set of skills. But on the other hand, you could imagine kind of having the core vary a bit based on their own interests or what they want to specialize in. So from your perspective as an employer, how important is it to know that all students coming out of a certain program have a very common experience?
Let's ask the whole panel, but for them to do it real quick in like 2 or 3 sentences, and then we'll break. Barb, why don't we start with you?
That's a tough question. I think we definitely look to make sure that there is a core set of courses that they've taken, that we really want to make sure they have the microeconomics, the statistics, and the econometrics. But I actually think it's important to give them the flexibility as well to tailor their program according to what their likes and dislikes are. So I'm a little bit on the fence on this. I'm not sure which way I'd come down.
I agree with Barb, and I would be looking more at the individual student than trying to remember which school has which kinds of core. Oh, you've got yours.
Yeah, I would echo that comment. It's more looking at the individual person than trying to keep track of which program has what core.
I agree.
So to tie this up and to say thank you so much for the panel, thank you so much for the audience and the webinar audience. We have a great day ahead of us. Thank you very much for putting up with this format, and audience, have a great day. Thank you very much.